The glass hit the mahogany table with the force of a gunshot. Shards of crystal exploded across the boardroom, raining down on the carpet. For a long second, nobody breathed. The 20 executives in the room froze in their leather chairs. Julian Vance stood at the head of the table. His knuckles rested on the wood, pressed so hard his skin turned white. He was a man who never lost his temper. He was cold, calculated, and ruthless, but right now his dark eyes were burning. Project Titan, Julian said. His voice was dangerously quiet, slicing through the heavy air. 2 years of development, millions in research, and this morning, I woke up to find our entire blueprint on the homepage of our biggest competitor. He threw a thick folder onto the table. It slid and stopped exactly in front of the assistant's chair. Clara stared at the folder. Her heart hammered wildly against her ribs, loud enough that she thought the whole room could hear it. She looked up and met Julian's gaze. There had always been something unspoken between them, a lingering tension during late-night strategy meetings, a spark that flared when their hands brushed over a stack of files. She felt it, and she knew he felt it too. But the look he gave her now contained no warmth. It was pure, freezing ice. The security logs, Julian said, his eyes locked on hers. The transfer was initiated at 2 a.m. From your terminal, Clara, using your personal access codes. The room shifted. 20 pairs of eyes turned to her, heavy with judgment. Clara stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she forced her spine straight. Julian, you know me, she pleaded, her voice tight. I was here until midnight organizing your notes. I went straight home. I didn't do this. The logs do not lie, he snapped. Clara's gaze darted around the table. It landed on Marcus, the vice president of operations. Marcus was leaning back in his chair, casually spinning a pen. A tiny, almost invisible smirk rested on the corner of his mouth. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Marcus had asked to borrow her computer yesterday afternoon to print a confidential file while his network was down. She had trusted him. She had turned her back. It was Marcus, Clara said, pointing a shaking finger at the man. He used my terminal yesterday. He set this up. Marcus sighed, putting on a perfect mask of pity. Clara, please, don't make this uglier than it already is. Why would I leak my own life's work? Because they offered you a VP position at their firm. Clara shot back. She turned to Julian, her eyes begging him to see the truth. Check his phone records. Look at his offshore accounts. Please, just look. Julian stared at her. For a fraction of a second, she saw a flicker of doubt in his dark eyes. The magnetic pull between them strained, begging him to trust her. But Julian was a CEO first. He relied on hard facts, and the facts pointed directly at her. Enough, Julian commanded. The finality in his tone shattered Clara's heart. I don't have time for desperate lies. You are fired, Clara. Effective immediately. The words echoed in the silent room. Security will watch you pack your desk, he added, his jaw tight. If you try to contact anyone in this building again, I will press criminal charges. The heartbreak washed over her, hot and suffocating. She had poured her soul into this company. She had protected him, and he was tossing her away without a second thought. But then the heartbreak vanished. It was instantly replaced by a deep, roaring anger. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. Clara lifted her chin. She walked out of the boardroom, her heels clicking steadily against the hardwood floor. She marched to her desk, ignoring the whispers of her co-workers and the heavy presence of the security guards. She grabbed a small cardboard box and packed only what belonged to her. A framed photo, her favorite pen, her notebook. As she turned to leave, she found Julian standing in the doorway of his glass office. He was watching her. The invisible string pulling them together was pulled taut, vibrating with tension. Clara stopped right in front of him. She stood close enough to smell his familiar, sharp cologne. She didn't step back. You're a brilliant man, Julian, Clara said, her voice dropping to a smooth, calm whisper. But you are blind. He didn't blink. Goodbye, Clara. I'm not saying goodbye, she replied, staring right into his eyes. I'm making you a promise. You will regret this day. Clara turned around and walked to the elevator. The doors closed, shutting out the only life she had known for the past 3 years. As the elevator descended, she pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. $32,000. Her entire life savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to buy servers, a domain, and the tools she needed. Julian Vance thought he had destroyed her. He didn't realize he had just created his biggest rival. She was going to build her own empire, and she was going to watch him beg. Julian Vance stared at the glowing computer screen. 6 months had passed since that terrible day in the boardroom. Now his empire was bleeding. He rubbed his tired eyes. The office was dark and completely empty. It was past midnight. He looked at the monthly revenue report again. Another massive client had vanished without warning. First it was Horizon Tech, then Global Dynamics. Now, Silvercorp was gone forever. They had all moved to a new agency. This agency had no physical office, no visible leader, and no track record. The name on the digital contracts was simply Apex Solutions. Julian slammed his heavy fist onto the expensive mahogany desk. He was losing. He never lost. Someone was stealing his life work right out from under him. The worst part was how they did it. Apex Solutions knew exactly what Julian was going to pitch, and they always offered a better deal just one day before his meetings. They knew his prices. They knew his weak spots. They knew his personal negotiation tactics. It felt deeply personal. It felt like a ghost was haunting his business. He picked up his phone and dialed a private number. He needed real answers. Across the city, a cold rain hit the dirty window of a tiny apartment. Clara sat wrapped in a thick blanket. The room was barely large enough for a bed and a folding table. But on that small table sat 4 large monitors. Lines of code and private financial models filled every single screen. Clara took a sip of cheap, instant coffee. It tasted bitter, but she did not care. She smiled as she watched Silvercorp sign her digital contract. She had done it again. She had taken another giant piece of Julian Vance right from his greedy hands. Clara was Apex Solutions. She had used her entire life savings to build a hidden digital fortress. Every night, she worked until the sun came up. She used every single secret she had learned while working for Julian directly. She knew his schedules, his vendor costs, and his aggressive expansion plans. She used all this insider knowledge to beat him at his own game. She did not even have to steal data. She simply knew how Julian thought. She predicted his every move with perfect accuracy. It was a beautiful, silent revenge. She was making him bleed, very slowly indeed. But the memory of Julian still haunted her. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of the morning, she remembered the intense way he used to look at her. She remembered the sharp smell of his cologne and the magnetic pull between them. It made her chest hurt. She had cared for him. She had protected him. But he chose to trust Marcus instead. He threw her away like garbage. The pain was still fresh, but it only fueled her burning anger. She pushed the memories away and typed a new command, quickly. It was time to target his next big client. Back in his massive office, Julian met with a man named Victor. Victor was an expensive private investigator. He wore a dark suit and had cold, dead eyes. Julian slid a thick envelope of cash across the desk. "Find out who owns Apex Solutions," Julian ordered, his voice low and dangerous. "They are operating in the shadows. They hide behind fake shell companies and encrypted servers. I do not care what you have to do, or how many laws you have to break. Find them. Bring me a name and a physical address. I want to crush them completely now." Victor nodded silently. He took the money and left. 2 days later, Victor began to find tiny cracks in the Apex digital wall. Clara was brilliant, but nobody was absolutely perfect. She had made a tiny mistake with a single server payment. Victor tracked a masked IP address back to a local internet provider. It took him another day of bribing technicians to get a physical location. The signal was coming from an old, broken apartment building on the east side of the city. Victor loaded his gun, put on a black jacket, and drove into the dark night fast. Clara was typing fast when a red warning light flashed on her main screen. Her heart jumped into her throat. Someone had breached her outer firewall. Someone was actively tracking her live location. She checked the security feed from the camera she had hidden in the hallway outside her apartment. A tall man in a black jacket was walking up the stairs. He looked professional and very dangerous. Julian had sent a hunter. Clara had less than 3 minutes before he reached her door on the 4th floor. Panic washed over her, but she forced her breathing to slow down. She needed a diversion, and she needed it immediately. She quickly opened a secret program she had designed for absolute emergencies. She typed furiously, redirecting her active network signal. She bounced her IP address through a nearby coffee shop, then to a public library, and finally to a large corporate building downtown. Then, she initiated a total wipe of her local hardware drives. The data transferred safely to a secure cloud server just as heavy footsteps stopped outside her thin wooden door. Clara held her breath. She backed away from the table and hid inside her small, dark closet silently. The door handle rattled loudly. Then, a heavy boot kicked the door open. Wood splintered and crashed onto the floor. Victor stepped into the tiny apartment, his weapon drawn. He checked the bathroom, the kitchen, and the main room. He looked at the 4 blank monitors sitting on the folding table. He touched the main computer tower. It was completely cold. He had missed the target. He pulled out a specialized tracking device from his pocket to scan for active signals. The device beeped twice and then showed a new location marker 5 miles away in the busy downtown district. Victor cursed loudly in the empty room. He turned around and walked out quickly, rushing down the stairs to chase the fake signal. Inside the dark closet, Clara let out a shaky breath. Her hands were trembling wildly, but a triumphant smile spread across her face. She had survived. She stepped out of the closet and looked at the broken door. This tiny apartment was no longer safe. Julian was getting closer. He was hunting her with everything he had. But he still did not know who she was. He did not know he was fighting a clever ghost tonight. She packed her screens and her tower into a large suitcase. She grabbed her thick blanket and her coat. She walked out into the cold, rainy night. The game had changed. It was no longer just about stealing clients from Julian Vance. It was a war for survival. As she walked down the wet street, she felt the thrill of the chase burning in her veins. Julian thought he was the predator. He was wrong. Clara looked up at the tall, glowing skyscrapers in the distance. She was the one holding all the cards, and the real game had started. Julian Vance sat alone in his massive glass office. The bright city lights blinked below him in the dark. He rubbed his tired eyes and stared at his computer screen. The private investigator had failed to find the physical location of Apex Solutions, but Victor did find one small thing. He found a highly encrypted, direct email address. It was the only way to contact the ghost destroying his company. Julian felt a sharp pain in his chest. His empire was falling apart. He opened a new message window. He typed quickly, his fingers hitting the keyboard with extreme anger. His message was short and brutal. He demanded a complete buyout of Apex Solutions. He offered $50 million to make the ghost disappear forever. He pressed send and leaned back in his leather chair. He expected silence. He expected another trick. But 10 minutes later, a soft chime broke the quiet room. A reply had arrived. The sender simply called themselves Alex. Julian opened the email with a tight jaw. The message was not what he expected. It was not a professional rejection. It was a sharp, witty insult about his failing business strategies and his obvious, clear desperation. Across the city, Clara sat in her new, secure apartment. She drank her cheap coffee and smiled at her monitors. She had read Julian's angry demand and laughed out loud. $50 million was a fortune, but this was never about the money. This was about revenge. She decided to play a new game. She typed her reply as Alex, mocking his aggressive tactics. She wanted to make him angry. She wanted to push his buttons. She pressed send and waited. Less than a minute later, Julian replied. His words were sharp, defensive, and dripping with his usual dark arrogance. The digital war started immediately. For 3 days, Julian and Alex fired emails back and forth like fast bullets. They argued about market shares, client acquisitions, and corporate greed. Clara used every piece of insider knowledge she had to destroy his arguments. She countered his logic with brilliant, undeniable facts. Julian was furious, but he was also completely fascinated. He had never met anyone who could match his intellect perfectly. Alex was a pure genius. He found himself checking his secure inbox every single hour. He was addicted to the intellectual battle. The anger slowly faded into true, deep respect. Then the shift happened. It was a cold Tuesday night. It was past 2 in the morning. Julian was exhausted. He sent a message about a contract, but he added a small, personal note at the end. He admitted he was tired of fighting. He admitted the heavy stress was finally getting to him. Clara stared at the glowing screen for a long time. She hesitated. She should have mocked his weakness. That was the original plan. But instead, she typed a soft, understanding reply. She told him about her own sleepless nights and the heavy burden of pure ambition. That single message changed everything between them. The aggressive business arguments stopped completely. Instead, the late-night chats began. Night after night, the secure server buzzed with private conversations. They stopped talking about clients and money. They started talking about their lives. Julian told Alex about his childhood. He talked about the immense pressure of building an empire from nothing. He talked about the fake friends and the endless, quiet loneliness at the top. Clara read his words with a heavy heart. She had worked for him for 3 years, but she never knew this deeply broken side of him. Clara found herself waiting for his messages every night. She poured another cup of coffee and watched the cursor blink. She shared her own dreams with him. She talked about her desire to build something meaningful, something that helped people instead of just making them rich. She kept her real identity hidden perfectly. To Julian, she was just Alex, a brilliant, faceless rival who somehow understood his soul. The irony was bitter and sweet. The man who had fired her, the man she wanted to destroy, was now pouring his deepest secrets into her waiting hands every single lonely night. Julian sat in his dark office, reading Alex's latest message. A genuine smile touched his lips. It was a rare sight. He felt a strange warmth spreading through his chest. Alex was witty, kind, and incredibly smart. He loved the way Alex saw the world. He loved the gentle encouragement in every message. He realized, with a sudden shock, that he was falling in love with a ghost. He was falling in love with the very person who was actively tearing his company apart. It made absolutely no sense, but he could not stop the deep feelings growing inside him. He typed a response carefully. He told Alex about his biggest regret. He told Alex about a brilliant, loyal assistant he had fired 6 months ago. He confessed that he had made a terrible mistake. He admitted that he missed her presence in the office. He missed her quiet strength and her sharp mind. Clara read the message and stopped breathing. Her hands began to shake over the keyboard. Julian was talking about her. He was talking about Clara. The cold, ruthless CEO actually felt deep remorse. The thick wall of anger around her heart began to crack and crumble. Tears filled Clara's eyes as she stared at the screen. She had spent 6 months plotting his total downfall. She had built a digital empire fueled entirely by pure hatred and a burning desire for revenge. But now she saw the real Julian. He was not just a cold machine. He was a lonely, flawed man carrying a massive weight on his shoulders. He was a man who deeply regretted his past mistakes. She wiped a tear from her cheek. The game had gone too far. The clear lines between love and hate were completely blurred. She was truly confused. Julian waited for a reply. The silence stretched on for 10 minutes. Then 20. He felt a sudden panic. Had he shared too much? Had he scared Alex away with his heavy confession? Finally, a new message popped up on his screen. It was short. Alex simply said they understood. Alex said that everyone makes mistakes, and that true strength comes from fixing them. Julian let out a long breath. He felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. He closed his eyes and imagined what Alex looked like. He desperately wanted to meet this person face to face. Clara closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. The room was perfectly silent. The sun was starting to rise over the city, painting the sky with soft pink and gold light. She had a massive choice to make now. She could continue the brutal revenge plan and destroy his company completely, or she could reveal her true identity and face the complicated mess she had created. The mutual attraction was undeniable. The emotional connection was real and powerful. She looked out the window at the waking city. Julian stared at the silver invitation resting on his desk. He was completely tired of hiding behind glowing computer screens. The endless digital war with Alex was draining his soul. He needed to see the face of his brilliant rival. He organized a massive masquerade ball for the business elite. The grand event was held at the famous Crystal Pavilion. He sent a single, secure email to Alex that morning. "If you show up tonight, I will stop attacking you. I will pull back my lawyers and drop the investigations. Just give me one dance and one honest, real conversation." Clara read his message a dozen times in her apartment. The trap was incredibly obvious, but the offer was tempting. She needed him to stop hunting her tiny, hidden company. She also desperately wanted to see him in person again. The late-night chats had changed her heart so completely. She bought a breathtaking, emerald green gown that swept the floor. She chose a delicate, silver mask adorned with dark feathers. It covered the top half of her face very perfectly. Her dark hair was pinned up in a loose, elegant style. She looked completely different from the hard-working assistant. The Crystal Pavilion was a dazzling sea of expensive silk. Huge crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the crowd. Soft classical music floated through the warm, heavily perfumed air. Waiters carried silver trays filled with expensive champagne and caviar. Julian stood near the grand staircase, wearing a sharp tuxedo. A simple black mask concealed his eyes, but she knew him. His broad shoulders and confident posture were impossible to miss. Clara took a deep breath to calm her wildly beating heart. She stepped into the ballroom, feeling like a beautiful, dangerous spy. Every eye turned to look at her. Julian saw her instantly, and the whole room completely vanished. He felt an invisible, magnetic pull drawing him directly forward. He walked across the marble floor, ignoring the wealthy guests. He stopped right in front of the mysterious woman in green. "Alex," he whispered softly, his deep voice sending warm shivers down her spine. "You actually came tonight." Clara nodded slowly, not trusting her own voice just yet. He held out his large, warm hand in a very polite invitation. "May I have this promised dance?" he asked her quietly. Clara placed her trembling hand inside his, accepting the challenge. He pulled her gently toward the center of the dance floor. He placed his hand on the small of her back. The sudden contact sent a rush of electricity through her veins. They began to move slowly to the soft, romantic music. Julian stared down at her, his dark eyes searching hers. "You are more beautiful than I ever imagined," he murmured. Clara felt a hot blush rise to her covered cheeks. "You do not even know what I look like," she replied softly. Julian pulled her a fraction closer, his chest brushing against hers. "I already know your mind." "And right now," Julian continued, "that is all that matters." They danced in perfect silence for a long, beautiful moment. The heavy tension between them was thick, warm, and intoxicating. Julian frowned slightly, tilting his head to study her lips. "You feel incredibly familiar to me," he whispered with confusion. "The way you move and breathe. I really know you." Panic flared hot and sharp in Clara's tight, anxious chest. She looked away, terrified that he would see the truth. "We have never met like this," she lied very smoothly. She forced a calm smile to hide her deep fear. "Maybe," Julian said softly, "but my soul recognizes yours tonight." The song ended, and Clara quickly pulled away from him. "I need some air," she gasped, rushing off the floor. She pushed through the crowded room, seeking a quiet hallway. She found a secluded balcony and stepped out into darkness. The cool breeze felt wonderful against her hot, flushed skin. She leaned against the stone railing, trying to steady herself. She was falling in love with him all over again. It was a terrible, beautiful disaster she could not stop. She closed her eyes and let out a shaky breath. Suddenly, she heard hushed, urgent voices coming from the shadows. She froze perfectly still, pressing herself flat against the stone. She peeked around the heavy velvet curtain covering the window. Two figures stood in the dark corner, arguing in whispers. One of them was Marcus, the corrupt vice president here. The other person was Sarah, Clara's old, trusted best friend. Sarah was wearing a bright red dress and golden mask. Clara's stomach dropped violently as the puzzle pieces clicked together. Marcus had not acted entirely alone on that fateful morning. Sarah had helped frame her in the boardroom that day. Sarah had given Marcus the private passwords to the system. She had always been deeply jealous of Clara's fast promotions. She smiled, offered fake sympathy, and stabbed Clara's back deeply. Now Sarah was speaking fast, holding a small silver drive. I have the core access codes to the financial server. Julian is distracted by this ridiculous party, so we strike. Marcus smiled a cruel smile and took the silver drive. Once I upload this virus, Vance Enterprises loses everything instantly. We will be rich beyond our absolute wildest dreams tonight. Clara listened in total horror as they plotted their crime. Just make sure it cannot be traced back to me, Sarah warned him, looking around the dark balcony very nervously. Do not worry, Marcus sneered. I will blame the ghost. Clara covered her mouth with both hands to stay quiet. The true traitor was her oldest friend, driven by jealousy. They were planning to destroy Julian's entire company in minutes, and they were going to use Clara's fake identity again. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Julian had ever done. She watched Marcus slip the flash drive into his pocket. He turned to leave, heading toward the private executive office. Clara had a massive, terrifying choice to make right now. She could walk away and let Julian lose absolutely everything. It would be the ultimate revenge she had originally planned. His empire would burn, just as he had destroyed her. But Julian was no longer just a cold boss today. He was the man who bared his soul to her. He was the man who had just held her close. She could not let Marcus destroy the man she loved. She had to act, even if it ruined her cover. She ran back inside, her mind racing with dangerous thought. Clara pushed past wealthy investors and elegant women in gowns. She finally spotted Julian standing near the busy champagne bar. She ran up to him, grabbing his arm with force. Alex, Julian asked, surprised by her sudden and panicked grip. You have to listen to me right now, Clara whispered. Marcus is going to upload a virus to your server. He has a silver drive inside his dark tuxedo pocket. Sarah gave him the core access codes tonight. Stop him. Julian stared at her, his eyes widening in total shock. How do you know that? He asked, searching her mask. Julian stared at the mysterious woman in the emerald gown. He did not ask any more questions. The absolute terror in her voice was entirely real. He turned sharply and sprinted through the crowded ballroom, his heart pounding against his ribs. He pushed past the heavy oak doors leading to the private executive wing. The corridor was completely dark and strangely quiet. He reached the server room just as the heavy security lock clicked shut. Marcus was inside. Julian slammed his shoulder against the thick glass, but it did not break. He needed the master override code to enter now. Suddenly, a loud siren echoed through the entire building. The flashing red lights illuminated the dark hallway. Someone had triggered the internal lockdown protocol from a remote location. Inside the secure room, Marcus cursed loudly, throwing his hands in the air. The main computer terminal locked him out completely. The silver drive in his hand was utterly useless now. Julian watched as security guards rushed down the hallway, their heavy boots hitting the marble floor. They grabbed Marcus firmly, pinning his arms behind his back. Julian exhaled slowly. The company was safe, but the invisible savior was gone completely again. Julian walked into the server room after the guards took Marcus away. He looked at the main computer screen. A small, flashing message blinked on the dark monitor. It was a digital signature left behind by the remote user. Julian leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. It was not a complex hacker symbol. It was a simple, familiar code sequence used exclusively by his old assistant. Clara had created that exact shortcut 3 years ago to organize his daily schedule. The truth hit his chest like a massive, heavy stone. Clara had never betrayed him in the first place at all. He had fired the only person who truly protected his empire. The guilt washed over him, thick and suffocating. He remembered the cold look in her eyes on that terrible morning. He remembered how he refused to look at the security logs properly. Sarah and Marcus had planned the entire thing perfectly. They had used Clara as the ultimate, innocent sacrifice. Julian ran his hands through his dark hair, feeling completely sick. The brilliant woman in the emerald gown, the mysterious Alex, had known about the attack. Because Alex and Clara were closely connected in some strange and real way. Julian left the party immediately and returned to his silent, empty office. He sat in his heavy leather chair until the sun started rising. He pulled out his private laptop and opened his secure email. He needed to finish this digital war right now. He typed a short, demanding message to his invisible rival, Alex. No more games. No more masks. Meet me in my main office at 9 sharp this morning. If you do not show up, the deal is completely dead. He hit send and stared out the large glass window at the beautiful waking city far below. Across town, Clara sat on her small bed, still wearing the beautiful emerald gown. The delicate feathered mask rested on her pillow. She read his harsh message and felt a deep, twisting knot in her stomach. She had stopped Marcus from destroying the company. She had saved the man she loved, but she had also exposed her own digital footprints. She knew Julian had found the old assistant code she used to trigger the lockdown. The time for hiding was officially over. She stood up and walked to her closet. She needed to prepare for the final, ultimate business battle. She took off the expensive silk dress and hung it up very carefully. She reached into the back of her dark closet and pulled out a sharp, tailored black suit. It was the armor of a true executive boss. She pulled her dark hair back into a tight, professional bun. She picked up her old, clear reading glasses and slid them onto her face. The innocent assistant and the brilliant digital rival merged into one powerful woman. She looked at her sharp reflection in the mirror. She was terrified, but she was also incredibly ready to face him completely today. At exactly 8:55, Julian paced nervously back and forth across his expensive carpet. His stomach was tied in a million tight knots. He smoothed the lapels of his dark suit jacket. He poured a glass of cold water but did not drink it. He wondered what Alex would look like in the bright morning light. He wondered if the electric connection they shared online would translate to the real world. He wanted to apologize for the harsh words they had exchanged. He wanted to confess his true, deep feelings to the brilliant woman who had stolen his heart. The heavy wooden door to his office clicked loudly. The brass handle turned very slowly. Julian stopped pacing and held his breath tightly. He stood tall behind his large desk, trying to project absolute power and calm confidence. The door swung open, revealing the bright hallway behind it. The woman stepped over the threshold and walked into the center of the large room. The bright morning sun hit her face perfectly. Julian felt all the air leave his lungs in one violent rush. His heart completely stopped beating inside his chest. He could not believe his own dark eyes now. Clara stood before him, wearing a sharp boss suit and her old assistant glasses. She carried a sleek black briefcase in her right hand. She did not look down. She met his shocked gaze with pure, burning fire. The silence in the massive office was deafening. Julian opened his mouth to speak, but no actual words came out. His brilliant mind scrambled to process the impossible reality standing directly in front of him right now. The ruthless rival stealing his clients, the mysterious online woman he loved deeply, and the innocent assistant he had utterly destroyed were all one person. "Hello, Julian," Clara said, her clear voice cutting through the thick, frozen silence. She walked forward and placed her black briefcase gently onto his expensive mahogany desk. She did not blink. She did not show any weakness. "You demanded a final personal meeting with the owner of Apex Solutions today. Well, here I am." Julian gripped the edge of his desk, so hard his knuckles turned completely white. His whole world tilted dangerously on its axis. He stared at her familiar lips, remembering the beautiful emerald gown and the soft, breathless whispers they shared on the dance floor last night. He remembered the long, intimate emails filled with secret dreams and quiet confessions. He remembered firing her without a single ounce of mercy 6 months ago. The heavy realization crushed him. The woman he loved deeply was standing here to take his entire empire. Clara watched his dark eyes widen with pure shock and deep regret. She felt a sharp thrill of ultimate victory, but her heart also ached for him. The board members were waiting outside. The final game was about to reach its very explosive end. Julian swallowed hard, completely unable to look away from her beautiful face.